Thank you so much, Adam, and thank you very much, Brian. It is indeed an honor to be here and assisting you on your visual literacy quest, I'll call it. We are very proud to be a small part of that. Rachel and I will speak, I think, for about 35 or 40 minutes, and then there will be certainly time for questions, which we hope we're able to answer. The title of our chat is, we are called Video Chat Network. The title of our chat today is Visual Literacy in the Real World. And that means today we're not talking about theoretical constructs. We're not talking about pedagogical theory. We are talking about visual literacy as is practiced by real people in the real world right now. And our particular fieldwork has been concentrated on the United States, but the world, we'd love to do the world at some point. So what's a marketing research company doing in an extraordinarily wonderful place like the Toledo Museum? And just to let you know, just 5 minutes ago, Rachel and I got our picture taken for our Facebook page right in front of the caller as well. So thank you very much.
It's been documented.
So, okay, just a quick abstract of what we have done. We have fielded qualitative research on behalf of the museum to define visual literacy from the everyday, real-life practitioner perspective. Our findings indicate, and this is qualitative, so we haven't proven anything, but boy, we've discovered some really exciting things. We have found, reconfirmed, and documented there is a spectrum of visual literacy mastery in our sample population. We have discovered that specific individuals can possess varying levels of different types of visual literacy mastery. In one person, in one particular area, they can be highly visually literate, and yet in another, not very trained at all. We have discovered, and this is a methodological discovery that could really influence how we do further research and how you folks might approach certain problems, that visual literacy mastery in still images is really different than visual literacy mastery around video. And we have some very interesting findings that we don't know what to do with yet, but we wanted to share them with you. Our most exciting thing, we think, that we have delved into is that over the course of participating in this fieldwork, in these exercises, which we'll outline for you, individual respondents, we observed, and they stated that their visual literacy skills had improved just in the context and the course of performing the exercises in the study. This has a lot of relevance for some of the things that you're trying to do. And the last thing is, and this goes to the heart of the question that the museum wanted to engage us in the first place, that the real people response adds considerable depth of understanding to an ultimate definition of visual literacy. And I think you'll be very interested how individuals of varying degrees of visual literacy mastery, all of them have very specific and thoughtful ideas of what visual literacy actually is. And we'll share that with you. That'll be the last thing that we share with you. Okay, so what do we do and how do we do that? We, or at VCN, leverage digital technologies, as Adam noted, and human talent to deliver real insights. We do that for clients, business clients all over the world. We explore what real people think, feel, believe, and do. And we do it where they live. We don't bring them to another facility, third-party facility, downtown in a city, in a strange place full of strange people. We talk to them where they live and how they live. And you'll see exactly how we do that. Our task, okay, we spoke about your visual, you've been speaking about TMA's visual literacy program, you know about that. Our objective, to conduct qualitative research to understand how visual literacy currently manifests among mainstream visualists, that's the last time you're going to see that word, across the country, and how this compares to people who are more or less visually literate. Our methodology. We started with our most important targets, and this is the first preliminary study. And the first targets were college and postgrads, that's young people 18 to late 20s, and then what we call corporate and professional people, and that's people from their late 20s through 50s and 60s in various positions in the corporate world. And we explored, quite simply, how visually literate they are. So the first thing, okay, and One of the things we did is we started some assumptions, and these assumptions came in working with Adam and his team. And we started with saying, okay, our typology is going to start off with this hypothesis, more than a hypothesis, the working definition. There are somehow three basic levels or buckets of visual literacy. Okay, and the first level we call untrained, which may be fair or unfair, but that's our label for them. Okay, how do they act? When they talk about what they see, what they immediately see is what you get in their response. Little time spent scrutinizing an image, identify very few details, doesn't describe what they see, or does not really in a real coherent way. Not very terrifically talented actually generating stories, and most likely says, there's one interpretation of an image, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. The next level, a middle bucket, which we just term selective. These folks identify the image and then describe it when prompted, spend some time scrutinizing the image, identify some details, describes images fully, but in a little bit haphazard, can start to tie the easily observable elements of an image into a story, and understands the idea that there could be more than one story about what you're seeing at that time. And then finally, what we're calling the highly visual bucket. This individual most likely does not identify things without describing what they see first. Spends a longer time looking at the images, is able to identify lots of details, tends to have more well-organized descriptions of what they see, can tie multiple elements of what they see into a narrative or a story, and can fairly easily generate multiple interpretations of what they see. Okay, so taking that, we then took a wide sample in these two groups, and we had them generate responses to a picture. And we used their descriptions of this image to evaluate them and place them in buckets for our sample. This is the image. Now, I'm not going to describe this image because that's what they did. And actually, to get you in the mood, I'm going to ask you to think about that image. I'm going to ask you the questions, and you can think in your own minds for a minute, how would I answer these questions? These are the questions, the live questions that the respondents saw. Describe what you see. Identify what it is. What details do you notice? Tell us a story about this image. Are there any other interpretations to what you see? Let's just see the picture again for a minute. Okay, just take a few seconds just to look at this picture, and what do you see? What story, what details do you see? Is there any story that comes to mind? Or perhaps another one? Well, let's see what our respondents said. And again, we are going to see a selection of folks who are in the three buckets from untrained through highly visual respondents.
I see apple pie. The pie is kind of gooing and looks like it just recently kind of cooled off and is getting ready to be eaten.
There are 2 forks in the background and a bunch of apples.
We have some elements to the pie, such as the sort of the spilling out, sort of it's been a little broken up.
I'm making apple pie made of Fuji apples. It also appears to have a sugar top, or sugar crust top.
I see a folded napkin with what appears to be at least 2 forks and a pie server. I see some kind of pie tray and a wooden table containing what looks like a very messy apple pie.
I do not see a spoon, I don't see a knife. Looks like remnants of possibly whipped cream on the table.
I suppose it was painting, or I suppose maybe photography too. We call it still life.
This makes me think of a holiday. Pies, for some reason, associate with a holiday, kind of like Thanksgiving.
This is a Thanksgiving family dinner. Everyone's gathered. They're about to enjoy this dessert.
It might be like someone's birthday or a holiday.
People were coming over for Thanksgiving. The host or hostess prepared some dessert.
On the one hand, it's a homey looking still life. On the other hand, maybe it's making a statement too about how, life isn't perfect, and that's not a perfect pie, and it doesn't need to be, because it's still a wonderful, delicious pie.
To look at a lot of the circular patterns with the plates and the apples, it kind of reminds me of a solar system.
There's emptiness in the room, It seems as if the table is present without anyone sitting around.
This pie is a symbol of Western decadence, and plenty of people eat root vegetables and are happy to have them, let alone to consider what they could have for dessert. That's another interpretation. Yet another contrasting interpretation could be this is a symbol of freedom. This is apple pie and baseball. This is a symbol of American freedom and must be upheld at any cost.
So that's a sampling, okay? We have lots and lots of interviews, but from that, we then took those people, we put them into the various buckets, and we moved forward with the field work. And we actually, at the end of the field work, had 38 evaluations. This is qualitative, 19 in the college and postgrad, and we had what we felt were 9 untrained, 5 selective, 5 highly visual. And we had additionally 19 corporate and professional, again, similar numbers in untrained, selective, and highly visual. And the interesting thing is that was the qualifications, or the evaluations that we made going in. Part of the discovery in the field work was that people were a little more elusive than that, and they in their actions they defined themselves a little bit more in a little bit more slightly complex way than we felt going in. So but that's part of the findings. So Rachel, will you take us through the field work and what we discovered?
Of course. So we put them to task with 3 exercises. Task 1, and I'll explain them in depth in a minute, was a still life image evaluation. Task 2 was a video and/or photo journal that they created and evaluated. And the last task was, after they had gone through all these other exercises, at the end was to reflect on their personal definition of visual literacy. So task 1, this was the still life evaluation. What we did is we created 5 different categories, and within each category there were about 50 images. And what they needed to do was select, we said at least 3, no more than 8 or something, images that you're engaged in, that you'd stop and take a second look at and reflect on. So the categories were art objects, B was pop culture symbols and icons, and then C were just everyday life scenarios, D were outdoor scenes, and E was worldwide images. And these were just sort of captions that we put on these buckets. We didn't tell them anything. It was totally blinded, so they could perceive these images any way they wanted to. All right, so task 2 was the video and/or photo journal, and I say that because they were, well, in a second I'll explain that. So they were asked to track a week of visual moments that take place in their everyday lives. And we said, these are moments when you might stop and take a second look at anything, and these could be happening at any time, any place. There's no limits on what these moments could be for you. And we said you can use either videos and/or photos to capture these moments, and then include a couple words describing why you chose those. So this picture here is actually from one of their exercises. These were done online. They were like blogs that we set them up with to do on their own. And you're going to see a lot more of these images in a minute, and these are like authentic right from the consumers, so they might not look beautifully art directed or what have you, but this is what it was. And then task 3, as I mentioned, was kind of face the camera and tell us in your own words what visual literacy means to you. So just to recap the findings that we stated at the beginning and what we'll be focusing on for the next couple minutes. First, there is a spectrum of mastery in the sample population. So any given image, for example, had a wide variance of interpretation from the low to the high. And any individual varied within those skills. So any individual could be low to high or anywhere in between throughout the exercises. We did notice more mastery with the still images, and the actual exercises improved individual skills. So as they went through the tasks and the week of the study, they got better and better, and we heard commentary to that they felt that they had, really learned a lot and improved, and also reflected some really interesting perceptions of the experience when they themselves defined visual literacy. Okay, so starting with the spectrum that we noticed of low to high, and this would be taking the same image and seeing how different people, were totally different in how they interpreted the same image. And as I mentioned, this was just an image that we didn't say anything to them about. It happened to be in our art object bucket, but that didn't matter. They could say whatever they wanted about this image. And a lot of people picked this image, by the way. It was very engaging. So what we have here are Jeremy and Lindsay and their entries, some analysis or interpretations that they had about this image. Jeremy was more on the untrained side, and Lindsay we had as a selective. She was sort of in the middle. So just focusing on the details that they noticed, Jeremy mentioned the 3 parts and 3 boxes to give focus on each part of the body. But Lindsay went into quite a bit more detail. She noticed that there are 3 boxes standing together, the images of a shark. However, the shark appears to have its head /front quarter diagonally cut off. At first glance, I did not notice that the head of the shark was missing because it has been chopped at a diagonal, and this almost looks like a mouth. I noticed that the wall behind the shark is white with a border on the ceiling of some sort, and the image of the shark looks almost like a negative because there is a symmetrical border around each box. So, that's pretty much the extreme from one to another, and there were, everywhere in between. And then to the stories, their interpretation of the image. Jeremy, his story was that the shark was killed before it could attack a person and is now a piece of art. Lindsay said the artist intentionally cut off the shark's head front quarter to trick the viewer. The artist is quite amused by the amount of people who do not notice the lack of head on the shark. So, very different interpretations and details noticed from the same visual. All right, so here's another visual that some people chose to talk about. Paulina and Lenny, again, on both ends of the spectrum. Paulina noticed that the pillows and sheets are a pale white shade, but Lenny noticed quite a bit more. The most interesting thing that I notice about this bed is the way the sheets are folded. They have created unique patterns that look like flower petals to me. The bottom sheet has many wavy-like lines or patterns as well, almost simulating the look of fabric sculpture. The shadows from the sheets are beautiful and look like a work of art. I really like the way the gray background sets off the white of the bedding, giving it some drama. Again, this speaks for itself that there's quite a range there. And again, the next observation having to do with the spectrum is that the same individual can move back and forth throughout the exercise. So here we have Paulina again. This was an example of an untrained interpretation that she picked, this visual on the left. And so describe what you see. The Love Park sculpture in the city. 2, identify what this is. The Love Park located in a major city. 3, what details do you notice? People, in fact, crowds, busy lunch hour traffic. 4, tell us a story about this image. On this cloudy weekday afternoon, the business professionals are walking outside to get to a meeting or reach another important destination. What other interpretations could you make about the image? Perhaps the traffic light is green and people are walking across the street. So, it's just not a very sophisticated interpretation. The first and the second, describe what you see versus what is this, are pretty much, stated the same way. The Love Park sculpture, she couldn't really discriminate there. She didn't give many details, certainly she focused more on the traffic and really didn't even focus much on the love sculpture. But the same person, Paulina, was quite selective. We put her between selective and highly trained in her interpretation of this image. So here she described what she saw as the polar bear holding an unopened Coca-Cola bottle. Identify what this is, a Coca-Cola commercial with a polar bear. Details she noticed, there are 3 more Coca-Cola bottles on the ice behind the polar bear. Tell us a story about the image. The polar bear is holding the Coca-Cola bottle, examining the freshness of the liquid in the bottle, feeling the coldness of the bottle in its paws, imagining how indulgence of tasting the cool liquid running down his throat. What other interpretations could you make? The polar bear looks very generous and willing to give others the bottle. He has more in stock, so he is ready to share the Coca-Cola wealth. So it's quite a difference. The same person, she was able to discriminate, describing what she saw as a polar bear holding an unopened Coca-Cola bottle, to what is this? This is the Coca-Cola commercial with the polar bear. And the details were much more clear and interesting, and her story was wonderful. We are continuing to do analysis and try to understand a lot of the findings here, but it was interesting because a lot of people in the study picked the polar bear image and also did a very nice job of explaining it. We're trying to understand in what certain instances, what can enhance visual literacy, in other instances, why not? So
there's a knee-jerk interpretation of that Coca-Cola employs highly skilled visual language practitioners in the creation of their advertising, and they spend hundreds of millions of dollars. So there's two...
Familiarity.
So familiarity and the skill in which the visual was produced is part of the explanation, but it's not all of the explanation, as we can see when we look at lots more of these responses. But go ahead, sorry.
Okay, so the next big finding that we found to be very interesting was that we noticed a much higher level of mastery over a still image versus a video. And again, we're really trying to understand this dynamic, and it's a complicated one that will probably require a lot of more research to really nail down, but clearly the video added complexity. So let's take a look at what we mean by this. Here's Alex. This is his photo. Again, he could pick anything that he wanted for his journal. So one day he picked a photo, and he took this photo, and he saw, what did you see? Lots of water drops on the hood of my car. What details did you notice? I noticed that seeing so many drops of water in a random pattern like this makes them almost lose their identity or make it appear to be something else. It can begin to look like a landscape of some alien planet, or it sort of looks like ice on a windshield. So how did you feel when you saw it? I was amazed by what water can look like. I wanted to capture it from several different angles. So, here he was classified as an untrained guy based on his apple pie video, but by having him go through this exercise, he really was enlightened by this rain, and water actually came up a lot in our photos too, but the rain on the hood of his car was quite interesting, and he really described it in a really interesting way. So Alex, another day in his video journal, decides to stop and take a video. So let's show you the video. Okay, so what did you see, Alex? A fire truck spraying its hose. This was the end of a 10K race I was running. The details you noticed, how the water crusted up over the tops of the trees and into a pond. How did you feel when you saw it? I felt invigorated by running underneath the giant arc of water. So, and we're going to show you another example of another video and how we've interpreted it, but it seems like the experience of taking the video is what he was reporting on. And also, it took him beyond just the sole focus on the visual into other, experiences he was having, which were multisensory. He talked about himself running under the arc. And it was more of an experiential kind of playback than versus a single-minded visual playback. And then Hope is another example. She one day looked at this beautiful flower and took a picture and said that she noticed the buds of this bush had opened where they had previously been closed for the past couple of weeks. I didn't think that I would see the beauty of this flower until next spring, and so this was a wonderful surprise. And she felt full of awe and joy. This was a very wonderful feeling. So then Hope, another day, she takes this video.
The details I noticed is, my mom wears glasses just like I do. Got a nice little top there, looking very professional, neutral colors. As you can see in the background, cars going by, houses are in the background. And basically what I feel like when I look at this video is it just reminds me that the older I get, I'm more and more like my mom. And what I'm learning from this moment is that, we don't get to see our mom a lot, so I wish we could see her more. And it just reminds me that life is short and we should always enjoy it.
So again, the experience of making this video kind of took her into many places. She first started a little bit about describing the mother and the cars and so forth in the background, but then she went off into, her feelings about her mother and how wonderful it was to have her mother with her and how life is short and she better, spend more time with her mother and all these beautiful feelings she had, but that were much more multi-dimensional than, tell us what you are observing here, the visual interpretation. So, and we saw that in most of the videos, they were just experiential, multi-dimensional sorts of.
One of the things, and we need to delve into this more, but it appeared that when there's a photograph lying there or a picture or an object, people can look at that object and describe it and separate themselves from the experience of that object. But when they make a video, another dynamic happens. That the act of making the video is part of the seeing. And so what we've learned is there's a lot more going on there, and that we have to learn and we have to employ some other observational techniques to get at it. But really fascinating in this context how video's complexity adds a complexity to visual literacy that we would like to investigate further.
Perhaps the most exciting finding from this research was how, the very act of participating in this kind of exercise, in this study, enhanced their ability to master the tasks. So here are a couple quotes from some of the participants. Hart, I learned that this study I have been participating in has increased my perception of my immediate environment. I wasn't actively looking for a photo opportunity, but I was struck by my reaction to this scene. This is when he was taking a picture of something, that I would have walked by just last week. Maybe the colors were more striking now that the leaves were on the ground. Who knows? The point is that doing an exercise in visual literacy has increased my consciousness of the things that pass through my field of vision. And I hope this heightened perception lasts. So, he was really realizing that this isn't something he wouldn't normally do, but he really enjoyed it and really, wanted to continue. And Remy, she said, I've been noticing smaller things that kind of go with my everyday routine that I wouldn't always notice. So leading up to, again, after the sorting, the image exercises, the photo sorting, and then the still images, and then the journals they did, we had them, for the final exercise, really reflect on everything that they had done for the last week and, tell us in their own words what visual literacy means.
Visual literacy is taking a step back and just really looking for meaning.
Being able to read what the art from in front of you is trying to tell you.
To generate information from it that could be valuable.
To relate it to your own personal life and make your own interpretation of it.
Knowing what you're seeing or being able to find out what something is that you don't know.
Process efficiently and accurately why things are appearing the way that they are.
Without having to worry about whether you're being manipulated or not.
Noticing things, figuring out why.
To see images or just things in everyday life and being able to interpret them and just decipher what's in front of you.
Interpreting it and changing it into words. Creating a story from photos or videos or whatever it is that you see.
The enabling of yourself to be able to be put into the scene, into the picture, into the video, into that moment, and to have a feeling about it, to get something out of it, physically and emotionally.
I think it's something to be trained, and I definitely feel like my visual literacy has improved as a result of taking part in this study.
And just to emphasize something David said before, that all of these people, some were untrained, some were selective, some were highly visual, but no matter where they were on the spectrum, they were actually able to, define it in terms that really made a lot of sense to them and to us too.
Absolutely. So that's what we've gotten so far. And in our study and the further definition using real people to understand visual literacy, we think there's some implications for further study and for some of the things that the museum is doing here. I think overall, we're very encouraged by the real-world approach, and we think it's really viable in helping a number of things in the visual literacy quest, if you will. It can be very helpful in defining what it means to real people of every level of mastery, that we can understand visual literacy influence on people's lives, and that we also has implications in the teaching of the improvement of visual literacy skills. And we think that these techniques, there's more to learn from the data that we've gathered. And we've seen some things that we didn't know about, that there is more to learn, especially in this area of video, as well as in the area of learning. And quite frankly, we're here with these preliminary findings, very excited about what we've found. We hope we've excited you and the folks at the museum, and we really look forward to learning more and helping these definitions move forward, as well as the learning and teaching process. Thank you very, very much. So if we have any questions, we have a few minutes. I don't know how many minutes, but Adam will tell us. Please, maybe we can turn the lights on now.
Yes, we can't see.
Sorry, I can vaguely see hands in the dark here. Right here, please, go ahead.
This is fascinating. I'm curious about the age demographic of the respondents. Was it purposeful that they were very young, or is that the nature of people who will respond in a video manner like this?
We had two demographic. We wanted the student, post-student graphic, which was 18 to late 20s. In the professionals, we were stopping short of retired. Okay, so we didn't have very young, we didn't have teenagers and below, and we didn't really have 60 plus. So we in this first study, we just cut off those two areas just for convenience sake in our very first step. That's the only reason. But I'm sorry, the question is, did we think they would be more likely to be visually literate, that they would be better respondents?
They look like they're mostly in their 20s and early 30s.
No, they were older. They were older than that.
The last
and
video.
the other thing is, perhaps we didn't select the ones that we selected. We didn't necessarily choose all the demographics necessarily for this presentation. So no purpose to that. I'm sorry, there was one right here. Please go ahead.
Just a couple of things. To me, it struck me that it was more of a mindfulness thing that people were demonstrating when they were talking about images. I mean, there's big movements on mindfulness now and looking at and seeing things and digging into them. And you seem to be at your mastery level or at your highest level. Those people just seem to be a little more mindful to me, which brings up the question of the word mastery. I mean, there's so much loaded behind mastery, and that you can't master visual literacy, which I don't think you can. You can't master any kind of literacy. You're always developing to become more literate in whichever way. And I'm wondering what kind of, you talk about real people, visual literacy is for everyone. Either be real well trained in visual. I've been a part of the Visual Literacy Association for a number of years and have read a lot of the research. When you pointed out those 5 things you learned, those are 5 things that have been a part of the understanding of visual literacy for many, many years since its inception. I'm wondering what kind of reading or background you've done on those who come before you in defining what visual literacy skills are.
We did not take a pedagogical approach, quite frankly, okay? We are not masters, we are not deeply entrenched scholars in visual literacy. We have a very particular, highly developed practice of visual literacy from the professional side, on the advertising side, if you will, and we have a very specific set of skills in eliciting authentic responses from real people in real situations. That's what our skill is. And I have to say that all of your points about mastery, is mastery the right word? You know, I can't say that it is or it isn't, and that and we know that there is a literature of individuals and scholars who have been studying this for a long time, and we bow to those definitions, and I think we have attempted to use the word mastery in a small piece of defensiveness. We've attempted to use the word mastery across a spectrum. Okay, and I don't think we didn't ever use the word mastery as an end point, but as a level of mastery, as more than or less than, as opposed to you now have reached elite guru of masterfulness. Okay, we didn't want it to be interpreted in the way that you said it, and vocabulary can be loaded, and we didn't mean to imply that. But thank you for pointing that out.
It's a huge issue in education.
Absolutely. Well, and we're certainly open to utilizing the words that help people understand what we've described. Absolutely. The mindfulness thing, that is a whole, I think that's a discussion with Adam and Brian and all the folks who are talking about this. Where is the Venn diagram circle overlap between mindfulness and literary and mathematical literacy is a really good question that we didn't address in this particular study, but it's a really, really good question. Thank you. In the back?
Did you ever think about adding people
It's a terrific idea for this preliminary study. We did not. But it's an absolutely spectacular idea. There was one over here, over on the top. The gentleman, sorry.
I was just wondering, when you're evaluating these participants, is there an objective rubric to decide which bucket they go into, or is it?
Can we put it back up? We put it back up. We did have a rubric for the initial bucket, and it was used as a working rubric, okay, and agreed with the museum folks and with Adam, with the understanding that it was a working rubric, okay. And we found, these were the rubrics, the levels of visual literacy here. I'm just reviewing them. We don't have to go through them again. But that was the rubric that we did use. What we did find, and we didn't put this up as a finding, that these rubrics were pretty constant. We found that let's go back to the untrained a second. And I think we saw some of these. What they immediately see is what you get, spend little time scrutinizing, identifies very few, if any, details. You saw a number of the untrained responses, and they were exactly what was said there. And we had that rubric before we did the research. So what I'm saying is the research did confirm these rubrics but I still want to call them working rubrics. And that's one of the points of the exercise, is how do we take these working rubrics and say, hey, they're not just working rubrics, and what kind of research do we need to do to take them beyond pretty darn good hypotheses into what we can believe is really true in the population. We're not there yet. Right here on the left.
Thanks. Can you tell me what kind of time were people given? And by that I mean not only the time to respond, to formulate a response, was that unlimited, but also the amount of time they might be given with an image. Were they given all the images in advance? They could reflect on them, spend maybe a week or two. I'm just curious about that, because I think often people respond to things slowly, or can respond quite slowly, or need time to think about something or reflect.
We gave them 2 weeks in total to do the exercises, and we suggested that they do them simultaneous, the first two, the still image resorts and the video journals. We had suggested they do them on a parallel path, but we said, you should take your time, like maybe do one of these visual sorts a day or every other day, because they had 2 weeks and there were 5 of them. And then, as much as possible every day, just be aware of things in your environment that you want to capture for your journal. So we did, we maybe could have given them more time, but we're mindful to give them enough time to do just what you.
And they had an unlimited amount of time in terms of formulating a response. They could speak for as long as they wanted or write for as much.
Yeah, I mean, some of them, the entries were really long, and it was really whatever they wanted to.
Totally open-ended, okay? They self-defined the length of their response. But actually, the self-definition went even further than that. There were 250 images in the image bank. They could have, if they wanted to, they could have written a response for 250 images. Now, some people did the absolute minimum. I'll call that 3 times 5. Some people did 15. Some people did 30. Some people, and then some people, one in particular, the one woman we saw, Linny, who talked about the sheet, okay, and all the sheet. She's a working artist. And she went nuts, and she said, I can't finish this. 2 weeks isn't enough time. I don't have enough time to do this, because the level of visual literacy that she practices every day means she has to. It wasn't like saying, that's good enough. That was what she had to say. So the ability to do whatever length you thought was correct was built into the. Now, could it be more? Good question, but it wasn't. Right here.
My name is Kat Wentz, and I'm a graduate student at the University of Akron in the Arts Administration program. And part of my thesis research, I'm interested in how elements of art and principles of design are used by advertisers to promote a feeling and kind of induce that consumer society that we live in today. So really using visual literacy as a way to combat the effects of advertising. But so any resources or references that you can provide me, I would really appreciate. But I've created my own hypothesis, and I would be interested in sharing that with you. But I was interested in why you think that nobody answered the question of what the apple pie, how that made them feel, or what they saw when you presented that, specifically in this room, why no one provided an answer. And more so why the untrained viewer kind of gives that superficial analysis of that. So I was just wondering if...
I'm good. Okay, 3 things. First of all, come talk to us afterwards about any references, okay, that we can give to you. Secondly, I need to repeat the thing. What do you say? No one answered the question. Did you mean no one in the what we said?
No one in this room. Why you think that no one in this room provided an answer?
Oh, yes, they did. Every person here thought in their heads. I was just asking them to think, but they should.
Didn't we project that answer?
I didn't. I did not give you the opportunity. I didn't. Well, no. First of all, it was not rhetorical. We wanted you to think that. And 2, we did not give you an outlet to give those answers. And I gladly do that. I'm sorry, but we didn't. Okay.
Right. Okay. So then, so forget that. And then why doesn't the untrained viewer give an in-depth analysis? Why do you think that?
That's why we're here, you know?
Right.
Adam, help. I'm sorry, please, I heard, we're crowdsourcing this answer. I heard one, a beginning of one.
So I saw 2 other hands go up, so to not answer that question, which is something I think I've gotten quite good at, it's just a heuristic, right? So this was a starting point for pilot research. So the idea that there's a bucket of untrained people that has any relevance to actual categorization probably isn't right? But it was just an easy sort to start getting at really what we're interested in this research is towards the highly visual end of the spectrum. Basically, how can you rubric out what that means so we can assess it, and then you can start backing into the other stuff. So I wouldn't put too much emphasis on the untrained bit for now.
But I would add that even within the untrained, they were able to be much more articulate about certain things, like the example of the polar bear. She was quite untrained in most of her responses, and then it's like, what is going on in the environment or whatever that allows her to be more more selective about that. You know, it could be familiarity or things like that, that some comfort level that she had in that visual. And then, you know, there are other, maybe some of the simpler visuals may have been easier for people to, but that's part of the analysis we're dealing with now. So there are some things that enable the untrained to be more effective.
Okay, I will give a very short answer, which is probably very provocative, but I think it lies in the label that we have assigned them in this exercise. The label we have assigned those people is untrained. Okay, so my personal hypothesis, which is brought out by some of the respondents, is that they haven't learned yet how to do it. I'll put that up as a great big, you know, big idea. Go ahead, right here, sorry.
I wonder, in terms of reliability or validity of the research, whether it would be better to have, let's say, a definition of visual literacy as a reference, and then to develop the dimensions that we wanted to measure. Because otherwise, it seems to me that it is very subjective interpretation of the data.
I was waiting for that question. I think this particular piece of the research was attempting to say, we think we know a little, and that's what these levels definitions are. We know a little, we don't know a lot, and we want to hear from a wide range of practitioners and understand from behavior, and take that definition from behavior as opposed to take our conventional wisdom beliefs. And that's just the approach we took for this research. And I think as we go to the next steps of research, we must answer that question for ourselves as we go forth. That's all I can say.
So, but you could use, let's say, ground theory, a constant comparative analysis in order to develop inductively a rubric for evaluating those that respond.
So
absolutely.
Now, because I'm going to wrap us up with
Sure.
one more question from you, not from me. So there are two answers to that question, right? There's the sort of real people in the real world answer, and then there's the philosophical answer. So the philosophical answer is, right, you can have an epistemology about things emerging from data as opposed to hypothesizing and fitting data to hypothesis. So it's just a different approach, right? It's an inverted approach. Not one is not right, the other isn't. The other thing, which is just kind of a little bit funny, right? I mean, not funny about the question, funny in general, is we're celebrating the 47th annual conference of the International Visual Literacy Association, right? And we're doing this research on the definition of visual literacy. So there's also the rubber hits the road with people who don't attend this conference. So the definition, whatever we were to posit, right, wouldn't necessarily be as interesting as figuring out, right, the utility of the concept to real people, which is going to embed within it a ton of variation. So it was a choice, it was a design choice to start broad and narrow, and it's critiquable without question, but it was a choice cognizant of the other options. So, and that's like a conversation I would love to keep having with you specifically, but I'm sure they would as well after this. So let's just get one more question. Oh, my boss wants to say something, so he gets to, and then we get one more question. That's how that works.
It's not a question. I just want to say that everybody who's here at this conference, I really want, if you will, you to think about how you can come up with ways to help answer these kinds of questions. In other words, I mean, I'll give it to you simply. I haven't yet come across a university that seeks to train every single person who goes to that university, right, how to see better in order to understand what it is that they see. That seems kind of strange, because we've got eyes and they need training. And so they're the principal gathering of information that we have. And so what ways could we convince a university to actually do that? So what our donors have said to us, and when we started fundraising for this, I mean, we basically got $5 million in the first month, right? People were that interested in this. Okay, we have it. That's not the problem. The problem is them saying to us, but how can you show that it works? What? Training people how to see better. How can you show that it works? So we need evidence-based research that can unlock such incredible sums of money that they could go to training the entire education system. So Adam's pointed to it. This is a little pilot. It's really interesting. And the impact for the advertising industry and advertising educational foundation and all that is massive, right? Because of diagnosis. But we want you to really think through this conference and say, if I were you and you wanted to be a pilot place for trying to convince the education system generally to import into it visual literacy training, what sorts of projects would you recommend us to do? And so give those to us throughout this conference and afterwards. And we're just one site, Toledo, Ohio, but where we've been doing this now for 4 years in a very concentrated way. And we haven't, money follows good ideas. This is a really good idea, and money isn't the problem. The problem is proving that it works.
So good luck fitting that into the comment section of the survey.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.